Having taken over the G20 presidency yesterday, the United States will host the first G20 Sherpas meeting in Washington on the 15th and 16th of this month. Washington has made it clear that South Africa would not be invited to the meeting, despite being a member of the Global Forum. Pretoria, having anticipated this hostility, is expected to channel its energies on the next host, that is the United Kingdom, in 2027. SABC News Correspondent Nick Harper joins us for more. Nick, the sentiment of the White House seems to be driven by Trump's seemingly disdain for South Africa, but there are technicalities. South Africa is a member and therefore entitled to participating in the G20. How does the U.S. anticipate in effecting its uninviting of South Africa, so to speak?
Well, you're absolutely right, Oliver. I mean, the assumption here is that any G20 member that is part of that grouping is allowed to attend the annual gatherings. But the US making it very clear that it does not intend to allow South Africa to take part in any of the events during its year-long presidency. South Africa has obviously pushed back against this, and there is some hope, potentially, that we could see some other G20 members come forward to try and lobby on South Africa's behalf to allow it to attend at some point over the next year. We've already heard from the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, for example, saying that he hopes to try and persuade Donald Trump to try and change the US president's mind to allow South Africa to attend. But at this stage, at least, the US does seem to be standing firm. We know that the US not only does not like multilateralism, but as you mentioned, has certainly shown disdain for South Africa under the Trump administration during Donald Trump's second term. So there is this unbelievable, really unprecedented push from the US to exclude a sitting G20 member from any of the meetings that will be taking place over the next 12 months.
Yeah. Is there any word from the UK, which are an important part of that troika, of course, and the UK Sherpa, of course, will be taking over when we take a look at the Sherpas meeting. And of course, it's important that they have a view on the uninviting of South Africa. And I say uninviting loosely here.
Well, exactly. That's right. I mean, I think it's interesting to note that dynamic between the US and the UK, because if we're looking for countries that could potentially move the needle here, the UK seems to be one of them. We know that the two leaders, Donald Trump and Prime Minister Keir Starmer, they do enjoy a warm relationship. It is something that Prime Minister Starmer has cultivated over the last 9-10 months with the US leader. There could be the possibility that Prime Minister Starmer could have a word in Donald Trump's ear to try and change the calculation here. No direct word really from the UK government in the last 24 hours on how it might approach all of this. But I guess there is that possibility that we could see, like Germany, the UK also trying to change all of this and get South Africa, loosely termed, re-invited.
Yeah. Importantly, I think it's also important to establish the mechanics here. When the US says South Africa is not invited, does that mean we'll just simply deny you visas? Is that the sense you're getting out of the White House?
Well, there is certainly that potential that the wider delegation of South Africa or any members, official members associated with it trying to travel to the United States might be denied that access. We saw that just a few months ago at the UN General Assembly in New York towards the end of September. The Trump administration denied visas to the Palestinian delegation at a time when there was still the Israel-Gaza conflict going on. It was angered by the Palestinian position and therefore really denied them any access to the meetings in New York. Mahmoud Abbas from the Palestinian Authority had to join virtually. So there is that possibility that not only visas would be denied, but perhaps even one step further for South Africa, there wouldn't even be a virtual invite for President Ramaphosa or any other officials taking part in any of the other lower meetings during the course of the year.
Other than the announcement of the dates for the Sherpa meeting, the 15th and 16th of December, what else has come out of the White House and or State Department pertaining to the direction of the G20 under the Trump presidency, thematically what their approach will be? I mean, all we saw was the best is yet to come, sloganeered above a photo of Donald Trump on the official communication channels. Do we know anything of substance about what the expectation ought to be?
A few things of substance, Oliver, but I've got to admit, all of this has been somewhat muted. Normally, when a country takes over the G20 presidency, they like to shout it from the rooftops. It's an opportunity for fanfare to really try and spell out what they hope to achieve during the 12 months, how they hope to shape multilateralism and geopolitics during the course of that year. But yes, we had that single image of Donald Trump with his fist raised, simply putting the dates for next year's conference in Miami, the Leaders Summit that will be taking place at his golf club down in Florida. They also put out a rather terse, short statement from the State Department, but there was very little fanfare surrounding it. They put out various priorities, 3 core themes they detailed. They said they were going to unleash economic prosperity by limiting regulatory burdens. They said they'd be unlocking affordable and secure energy supply chains and also looking at pioneering new technologies and innovations. But the Trump administration also saying they hope to return the G20 to its core mission of economic growth and prosperity to produce results. I think what's lacking from that is some of the other things that the G20 president would normally focus on, things like climate change, sustainability, looking at that divide between rich and poor, between different nations around the world. None of that is mentioned in what the US hopes to try and achieve, rather just saying that much needed reforms will be part of what it will be looking at. And therefore, I think the focus of this G20 presidency under the Trump administration will be very, very different, radically different from what we've seen in the past, really trying to mould it to Donald Trump's own world vision, that protectionism rather than multilateralism, the very thing that, of course, the G20 has been built on.
Yeah, and just lastly, Nick, every country has to appoint a Sherpa that will be sort of the lieutenant general of that country's G20 efforts, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a senior official in the Foreign Affairs or State Department, but has the US announced who their Sherpa will be? In South Africa's case, it was Zane Dango, who is the Director General of the Department of International Relations. Do we know if it will be a White House official or a State Department official in the case of the US?
If they have been announced, it's not a name that I've seen yet, but there is, of course, as we've seen during the Trump administration, the possibility of some senior official who already has a position within the White House taking on that added role. We've seen that with other officials taking on multiple tasks. The thinking is perhaps it could be Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, already a very high-profile position, but as the US's top diplomat, it would certainly put him in line for potentially trying to drive all of this forward. But no word yet in terms of the actual name that I've seen of the Sherpa for the US.
Yeah. Nick, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. That's Nick Harper. The SABC News has reached out to both DIRCO and the presidency for comment, and we hope to speak to a representative of either government entity on the program soon.